Hello everyone, my name is Fortuna Laura Maria Sipayung. I'm from class 1B. My NPM is 1210600 and 34. I came from the English Education Department, Faculty of Education and Science. In this video, I try to complete the mid-test assignment of Introduction to Literature 2022 with Miss Utut Kurniati as my lecturer. In this video, I will share with you about literature in Puritan period. The Puritans were originally only a religious group, but because of the pressures and unwise action of the Puritans by James I and Charles I, the Puritans changed. Both of them were disliked by the Puritans because of their despotism. The Puritans movement eventually turned into a political movement opposed to the king. At the beginning of 7th century, on March 24, 1603, Queen Elizabeth died after more than 4 decades on the throne. After the death of Queen Elizabeth, her brother James IV of Scotland, who was known as James I in England, succeeded the throne of Elizabeth. English Catholics had expected more religious tolerance under James I compared to the reign of his predecessor, Elizabeth I. James' wife, Anne of Denmark, was a Catholic, and the king initially appeared sympathetic to English Catholics. However, this hope was dashed in early 1604 when, in a speech to Parliament, James I said he detested the Catholic faith. Days later, he ordered all Jesuit and Catholic priests to leave the realm, following the conspirators to bring down the Protestant government. In 1605, there was the Gunpowder Plot, an unsuccessful plot to blow up the Parliament building in Westminster. The Gunpowder Plot was a failed attempt to assassinate King James I of England during the opening of Parliament in November 1605. The plan was organized by Robert Catesby, a devout English Catholic who hoped to kill the Protestant King James and establish Catholic rule in England. As part of the plan, Catesby it intended to kidnap James' 9-year-old daughter, Princess Elizabeth, and install her as a puppet queen. However, after that King James I was also involved. King James I was also involved in a conflict with the Parliament, where the costs for the kingdom were getting higher as were taxes. But the royal income was not sufficient. The only solution used was to increase the rent of the royal land. The power of the Parliament makes it possible for the Parliament to refuse to raise money for the king. This led King James I to look for other ways to raise money. The Puritans asked the king for permission so that they could practice church service in their own way. In addition, they proposed that the Bible be translated. King James I refused the first offer and accepted only a new translation of the Bible. The result was the dismissal of several Puritan priests from the Anglican Church. Since that time, the nonconformist movement began, namely the Protestant movement outside the official church, whose members consisted precisely of influential groups in society and in the House of Commons, mostly businessmen in the cities and partly from civil servants or noble. King James I actions against the Puritans sparked conflict between James I and Parliament, especially since the House of Commons was then ruled by the Puritans, so that problems from the religious field spread to the other fields, such as the government system, economy, and other fields. The situation of conflict or disharmony between the king and parliament continued until the reign of Charles I, son of James I. After the death of James I in 1625, the new monarch, Charles I, took religious persecution to a new level. He was asked by the parliament to sign the Petition of Rights, but he continued to show open disregard to parliament and folk. The ongoing conflict between the king and the Puritans group reached its peak in the Civil War. There was two wars in this period. The first Civil War was between the king and Puritans. King is supported by most of the nobility who sit in the upper house, Anglican, Catholics, Cavaliers, and Knighthoods, while the Puritans or Roundheads were people from the middle class, such as merchants and keepers from the cities near ports. They are called as Roundheads because some of them had a simple hired rule. King Charles I literally lost his head. The Puritans formed a commonwealth led by Oliver Cromwell, a military who supports Puritan, along with some people from Scotland, helped Puritans to win the war at Naseby in 1645. The Second Civil War was between the new model army and those people from Scotland who each of them wanted more power. The Scots wanted Presbyterianism to be a valid religion in England, but it was opposed by the new model army, while Parliament wanted to disband new model army without giving its members a fee arrears. Finally, the second phase of civil war broke out, which did not last long. The war was won by the new model army led by Oliver Cromwell. After Charles I executed, Oliver Cromwell made himself head of the English, and England transformed into a republic for more than 11 years. This period produced a number of literary works of various kinds. The literature of the Puritan period did not have the unity of soul, different from that was found in the literature of Elizabeth period. Gloomy, in contrast to the hopeful and empowering writings of Elizabeth, the literature of this period is sad rather than inspiring, more stimulating to mind than feeling. The literature of this period had lost the romantic passion of youth and became critical and intellectual. Poetry in the Puritan period is divided into three types. 1. Metaphysical poetry, 2. Cavalier poetry, and 3. Puritan poetry. First, metaphysical poetry. The term was first used by Dr. Samuel Johnson, a famous writer of the 8th century. Metaphysical poetry prefers intellect rather than emotion, so there are a lot of scientific terms in the poem. Metaphysical poetry has the following characters. 1. The poems are always in short version, have solid meanings, and very economical in the use of words. 2. The use of unusual imagination. 3. The use of harsh language and rude. 4. The use of science terms. 5. The theme revolves around human nature ambiguous, physical, and spiritual. There are plenty of prominent metaphysical poets in this period like John Donne, George Herbert, and Andrew Marvell. John Donne. He is the first poet of metaphysical poetry who was born and raised in a strong Catholic tradition. He studied in Trinity College, Cambridge, and then became a Lincoln Inn member. He was popular for his lifestyle, read a lot, but living lavishly. As a metaphysical poet, he used unusual imaginary and he doesn't use conventional comparisons. Rather, he uses fantastic metaphors and excessive hyperboles. Example, the sun rising, the god Morrow loves alchemy, and a valediction forbidding morning are some of his phenomenal works. As for the latter poem, Don said that his idea was telling about a couple even when one of them is separated. He is so popular in making a lot of poems about love. George Herbert. George Herbert was a Welsh poet, orator, and priest of the Church of England. His poetry is associated with the writings of metaphysical poets, and he is recognized as one of the foremost British devotional lyricists. He was born into an artistic and wealthy family and largely raised in England. He received a good education that led to his admission to Trinity College, Cambridge in 1609. He went there with the intention of becoming a priest, but he became the university public orator and attracted the attention of King James I. He served in the Parliament of England in 1624 and briefly in 1625. All of Herbert's surviving English poems are on religious themes and are characteristic by directness of expression in lived by original but conscious in which, in the metaphysical manner. For example, he compares a righteous preacher to glass through which God light shines more effectively than in his words. Andrew Marvell was an English metaphysical poet, satirist, and politician who sat in the House of Commons at various times between 1659 and 1678. During the Commonwealth period, he was a colleague and friend of John Milton. His poems range from the love song to his joy mistress to evocation of an aristocratic country house and garden in upon Appleton House and the Garden, the political address, an Horatian ode upon Cromwell returns from Ireland, and the latter personal and political satires, Flegno and Character of Holland. Marvell is said to have adhered to the established styles from all his contemporary neoclassical traditions. This included the Carpe Diem lyric tradition, which also forms the basis of his famous lyric to his Choi Misters. He adopted familiar forms and infused them with his unique concepts, analogies, reflection, and preoccupation with larger questions about life and death. 2. Cavalier poetry. The poets of this kind of poetry are the most loyal followers of King Charles I. They have high-spirited souls which are different with the metaphysical poets. They really love secularism things and not really a fan of religious things. They imitate a popular motto from a Italian Carpe Diem, which means catch the day, or in our current motto, it's like you only live once, so happy and do whatever you want to do. Make pleasure while you are still alive because tomorrow you might be dead. Some prominent poets are like Robert Herrick with some of his work, to the virgins to make much of time, to enjoy the time, and to daffodils. Thomas Carroll with some of his works, to his mistress in absence, and Richard Livelies with his poems to Althea from prisons. This is one of Cavalier poems to the virgin to make much of time of from Herrick. 3. Puritan poetry. Puritan poetry focuses on devotion to God and that all his actions are signs of his love or anger. Puritan poetry is often written in response to life events. The famous Puritan poet is John Milton. John Milton was not only a poet, he also served as Secretary of Foreign Affairs for Oliver Cromwell. He has many famous poetry like Areopagitica, Artis Logicae, Iconoclastes, History of Britain, Il Penseroso, L'Allegro on Shakespeare on the 5th of November on the morning of Christ's Nativity. But there is one of John Milton's very famous poem that entitled Paradise Lost. Prose. This period was rich in prose. English prose which had been formed into a harmonious and playable instrument by the Elizabethans began to be used in a various way, as narrative as well as a vessel for philosophical speculation and scientific knowledge. For the first time, the great scholars began to write in English rather than Latin. The greatest single influence which enriched the English prose was the authorized version of the Bible, or English translation of the Bible, which was the result of the efforts of scholars who wrote in forceful, simple, and pure Anglo-Saxon tones. So, the Bible became the supreme example of earlier English prose style. And the last is drama. The reign of the Puritan is produced a large amount of literature like poetry or prose, but drama could not thrive because it is prohibited by the authorities. Drama regarded as a nest of immorality by the Puritan authorities. It is just so different with Elizabeth period, where drama produced a lot of outstanding work. Because of these factors, not much of history records drama in the Puritan era. In the harsh reality, the writers at the time were not too interested in the development of drama at the time because the rules were determined. So that's all from me about the Puritans period. Thank you for hearing my presentation. Have a nice day.